Time and the presence of a quorum by the skin of our teeth. I call this meeting to the Acton Finance Committee to order. It is clearly a summer meeting because we are in reduced number. We have a relatively light but very important agenda nonetheless. I will start, as we always do, with public participation, and seeing none. I wonder if they're all over at the town hall.
It's busy over there.
It's busy over there? Okay. Okay. Now, with that being taken care of, we'll move on to our initial meeting with the new superintendent, Dr. Peter Light. We want to welcome you. And I did send an email in advance. Hopefully I didn't send too many topics at you at once. But the purpose of this meeting is definitely just to let you introduce yourself to us. We'd obviously like to get to know you a little better and hopefully start out a good working relationship for the year. I have been asked by a FinCom member emeritus to note that both you and the new town manager started at the same time. So if there are synergies to be had, please have some conversations and see what we can do on that one. In the meantime, though, since we put you first on the agenda, so that if you needed to get going, you could. But if you could just give us the 30-second background of where you came from, what attracted you to AB, and everything that you've discovered about the district in the 3 weeks that you've been on the job, and what all's been solved since you got here.
First, thank you for the opportunity to come and meet with you tonight. My name is Peter Light. I'm Mr. Peter Light.
I'm sorry. That's my bad.
That's okay. No, it's flattering, but I want to make sure I'm correct on the record. It's a great opportunity to start to establish the relationship, because I think, the schools and the finance committees of both of the communities really have to make sure that we maintain good communication in order to really make sure that the community trusts the processes that take place over time, and I think this is a great start to that. Just a little bit about myself. I have come from one district for my entire professional career. I worked in Franklin, Massachusetts for the past 21 years, and I served in a variety of capacities in that district. I started out as a substitute teacher and then a music teacher in the district. Eventually became kind of the K through 12 director of music for the community, and then served as a high school assistant principal for I think 9 years at the high school there, which is a good run for a principal at a high school, and then became the assistant superintendent of schools for a few years. So I think some things resonated with me looking at Acton Boxborough. I really did not apply to very many places. When I started looking at jobs, I was pretty selective about what communities I might have interest in. I think what stood out to me about AB was just the passion for education that the community has, and just how concerned for the public schools community members and families were. There is a lot of interest in the public schools, high expectations of the public schools. It's also a community that, I don't know how much you know about Franklin, but felt like a very natural transition for me, even though there's some complexities with AB that is a regional district that Franklin doesn't have, which is an obvious statement. But I think, in terms of the overall climate for education, genesis of it, Franklin, we always pride ourselves that, Horace Mann was kind of the founder of public education in the United States. He came from Franklin. Very historic kind of sense of education. And I think Acton and Boxborough really have that same historic sense and importance of the public schools. So that's really what attracted me here. I'm very committed to the type of work that the community's doing around education. The district's core values of wellness, equity, and engagement speak very specifically to the work that I had done. I had done a lot of work on social emotional learning. While I was in Franklin, a lot of work on student wellness, substance abuse, just really looking at how do we make sure our schools are supporting all aspects of our students. So that was really my interest in the community here, a little bit of my background. Major challenges, I think you know, you mentioned actually at the beginning of the meeting, looking for some synergies. And so one thing that I was able to do, John and I actually had coffee for the first time. Might have been this week, but it feels like weeks ago. Could have been last week. I've met an awful lot of people in a short amount of time, but John and I did have an initial cup of coffee. And what we're going to be doing is actually setting up a monthly meeting, and involving the new Boxborough town manager as well. Just so we can really, you know, foster that sense of communication. I do believe in strong collaboration with the town. That community I came from, you know, the town manager was the door next to mine, practically. So, you know, we were at each other's offices, you know, multiple times every week, communicating, talking about what's going on, and just looking for opportunities that we had of common interest. So I think that's something that I come from a strong background with, and I'm excited to kind of keep that going. In terms of major problems solved, I can share with you, because I think this is a burning question in everyone's mind. I actually just came from the MSBA earlier this morning. We had the meeting of the designer selection panel where we were able to review the 5 proposals that were submitted for the designer to engage in a feasibility study for the Douglas School. I was very impressed with that process in that the way, I'm not sure how much you know about how a designer selection panel is structured, but there's essentially, I think, 17 voting members of the panel. The district only has 3 of those 17, and the MSBA provides the other 14 members, who are all professional architects, staff members, engineers that really know the industry. So, you know, I'm always cautious going into a situation like that because you don't know how strong a voice the community can have. But I was very, very impressed with how much the members of the panel listened to the wishes of our building committee. And we were able to, I think, relay those wishes up front. We had met on July 2nd as a school building committee here at AB and reviewed each of the 5 proposals that were submitted. And we had very strong consensus around particularly 2 that we wanted to hear more from. And then we had some slight consensus around a 3rd, and then, you know, really there were a couple firms that even though we respected the work that they had done, it just didn't match what we were looking for. And we relayed that to MSBA, and what I was thrilled to come out with is we are going to be interviewing the top 3 firms that we had wanted to interview coming up 2 weeks from today. And that's an open public meeting, people are welcome to attend. You know, we sent that out to the building committee earlier today. I'm going to be sending it out to the school committee tonight just to make sure they're in the loop. But really good process, good outcome. So one problem half solved, and a good problem. So
Yeah, I remember that from the last school building committee meeting that the chance of it being a final vote on the first day was quite small. So to hear that we're going to the interview stage is not a surprise.
You know, I can't see a situation where you wouldn't want to go to an interview stage. I don't think that would be responsible. Even if you really thought there was one firm that you had a lot of confidence in, you know, you're making, you know, an investment that carries lots of zeros, let's say. You know, I don't want to put a price tag on it because, you know, putting numbers out at this point is not responsible. But it's a big number, it's lots of zeros, and I think, you know, we want to make sure we're doing our due diligence and really hearing from all of these firms so that when we do make a selection, it's one that meets the needs of the community. So that's
Great.
yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to let everyone else at the table have a quick set of questions, and then I'll just have a couple of comments at the end. We'll start down at the end. Mr. Majors, if you'd like to ask any questions, the forum is yours.
Oh, clearing the throat. So,
Yeah, my name is Mike Majors. I've been on the finance committee, I don't know how many years. A couple cycles.
okay.
You were talking about a lot of zeros earlier, that's all.
Zero. Okay.
And now by, I guess age-wise, I guess I'm the oldest.
I think Jeff's
Not
arguing for
necessarily the
that.
wisest
Yeah, Jeff might give you a good one for that.
by a long shot. But, you know, can't be a lot of questions for you at this stage. You're just getting started, but I just want to make sure that your mission includes that, you know, the students from Acton, Boxborough, are not only, educated in a competitive environment, but to become good citizens of the state and of the country. And, that with high moral and ethical values, a good sense of local as well as national history, understand wherever it came from and everything is in context. It's like wrong to compare, things that happened 50, 100, 150 years ago by contemporary standards. It just causes conflict. But I just would like to see that they become good citizens of this state and this country. So that's why we're leaving it in your good hands.
Great, thank you. I think those are great points. I think what schools have tried to do is evolved. And I think, sometimes we hear from the business world that it's about preparing kids for business.
Right.
We hear, but, I think fundamentally we're preparing people to become good people. Business will take care of itself. It does. The world works that way. And we need to certainly give kids skills to be able to go into whatever environment they choose to go into. But I think it's a great point that, at the most basic level, it's about, creating good people.
That's good. I'm also on the building committee for actually the Minuteman Regional Vocational Technical High School, which obviously Acton is a part. And we're in the middle of our building project. It's going along well. I think the region is going to get their money's worth. Project is going to finish under budget, or at least not over budget, and it's also going to finish a year early, 12 months early, which is good. And
perhaps a model.
Yeah.
Future.
Now you know what you're getting measured against.
The Acton
Can be
Boxborough
done.
Building Committee maybe follow that Minuteman model, and because they've had a lot of success. And some of the resources will be comparable to what the architect, the project manager, the general contractor, and they're all very critical elements. And once that process gets started, I would almost phase the school committee out of the decision-making process, assuming they all had their input, and at least turn on the responsibility to your building committee. Let them approve the dollars and cents, and because I think anytime you make changes, if the school building association is not going to pay for it or reimburse it, then I would really think twice about even putting it in the budget.
I think there's a lot of planning that has to go into the early stages to avoid change orders. They can certainly drive the cost. One thing I can share, I did just come off the building project in Franklin. We hit it at a far more favorable time from an economic standpoint. We were able to build a 300,000+ square foot facility for under $105 million.
That's awesome.
And at a 60% reimbursement rate.
That's terrific.
Because of the existing condition of our facilities, plus choosing a model.
Those were the days.
Project. So, both of those are not necessarily on the table. And, certainly construction costs have escalated, but, we were under budget, turned a lot of money back.
That's good.
To the community and certainly finished ahead of schedule. So I think, I think your points, particularly about change orders, are great ones because they certainly, A, have the potential to delay a project significantly, and then B, can also really drive costs,
Right.
after the fact. So I think it's a great point of control on the budget.
That's good. Well, I'm satisfied.
So Christine is actually this year's liaison from the Finance Committee to the ABRSC, so you'll be seeing her at your meetings. Christine, the floor is all yours.
I'm Christine Russell. I have a high schooler, and I have one going into the junior high, and one year left at McCarthy Town. So I'm hitting them all this year.
Yeah.
And just to continue what Mike said real quick, not just change orders, but we would appreciate keeping an eye on even upfront additions that we already know the MSBA would not give us any kind of return on. I understand that we're dealing with, we've got the twin school and we're looking at it and saying, well, it would be nice if, but just being really conservative about those ifs, because I understand MSBA isn't going to pay for two of, where one would be covered. So 2 cafeterias, 2 gyms, 2 that, whatever, it may be the want list, try to, of course, keep it constrained but functional.
Yeah, I think, the project right now as it stands with MSBA is actually the Douglas School.
Right,
And I want to make sure I'm clear about that because that's MSBA's expectation.
Yes.
We're really doing a study of the Douglas School, but as part of that, we're exploring the feasibility of a twin school option.
Right.
Which, they were favorable toward, I think.
Right.
But I like to take the cautious route
Good.
on things and not get ahead of expectations. I think that's always important. So I think, looking at, I would agree with you. I think, one of the reasons that MSBA is going to look favorably upon a project that looks at efficiencies, like, shared spaces,
Right.
really is rooted in there are cost savings. There's cost savings to them, there's cost savings to the communities, which ultimately is the taxpayers.
Yes.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think that's certainly going to be on everyone's minds as we go through the project. I think, there are other elements that I think as architects start to propose different features in a building, you also want to see what the long-term cost benefit is going to be. For example, MSBA, reimburses for different environmental and energy savings
Right.
at certain levels. But there may be levels beyond what they reimburse that show a long-term cost savings.
all for that.
The community may say, that's something that we have interest in because even though we might pay, a little bit of money up front, more than what might be reimbursable, we're gonna realize this savings
Right.
over the long haul. So I think
Those are great to keep in mind,
it's
absolutely.
all about balance.
It is, yeah.
But I think any type of decision you make has to come with a financial analysis. So even if you choose something, you understand what the impact is.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. So you, of course, came into the district and without a lot of time under your belt, we have to deal with the death of a student, which, as I'm sure you're aware, has been an issue for the district over the last couple of years, that we hoped we had kind of saw, I understand these things tend to come in little bursts, and I hoped we had seen the last of it. So with your experience, how do you think we handled it? Did you change anything? And do you have any plans going forward there's only so much we can do, but are we doing everything we can do and doing it in the right way?
I think that's a long-term question as well. But I think, initially, I thought the staff did a very, very good job of handling the situation and doing something in trying to plan for a crisis in the middle of summer is very different than
Yeah.
when you have all of your staff available. But, our administrative team was assembled within a couple hours of finding out, and was able to really work. We liaised with Riverside Trauma Care out of Needham. They were wonderful. They had someone on site in the same time frame, and they are really experts in this field because they deal with all of the districts in the region who have experienced similar types of issues. The counseling staff was amazing. They dropped their summer vacation plans, came back from vacations, stopped weekend plans, and we were able to open up the high school.
How
for
was
students.
that? Did students come?
We did kind of a private session for students on the track team
Okay,
first.
yep.
And we had pretty good turnout from that.
Okay.
And then we held kind of an open session for other students who may need some support, and then we also held times that parents could come in with them.
Okay.
But kind of sent the parents to a separate room so that, they could learn strategies they could use at home.
Yep.
To talk to their own kids, while the students were receiving direct support about what their needs were. So I thought that was effective. I always think of situations like this that you have to plan for the short term, which is how do you make sure, A, you're supporting your students through the grieving process, supporting your faculty through the grieving process, and just taking care of the people involved, because as sad as the loss is, it also impacts a really broad
Right.
population in the community. So there's the short-term element of planning, and now what we've done is we've transitioned into kind of the mid to long-term.
Yeah.
So I know the high school is working on a communication now to go out to families soon, just about, additional supports that may be available during summer months for students, and then planning how we can support students and faculty as they come back in the fall, and also provide some parent outreach as well. So, I don't want to say that, there's a full assessment, but I do know, coming from my own district, that the AB far exceeds what most districts are offering students for mental health supports. So I think, that doesn't mean that the problem is solved, obviously.
Right.
But the schools have done a tremendous amount of work on this over the last few years. Staff are very, very committed to it. There's a level of student engagement in that process. And
I honestly think that's what led such a great response. The first incident was not handled the way the students felt that it should have been. The
Yeah.
students spoke up, and following
Okay.
incidents, it changed everything. So
Yeah.
it did seem very collaborative with students, and I'm glad to hear that you think that they're all in. That's great.
Yeah, so far, we've received good positive feedback from people about that, but I think people are nervous too.
Yes, yeah.
As I certainly understand, that it, I've only been in the district about maybe 2 weeks.
Right.
At the time it happened, and I'll tell you, it impacted me at an emotional level that if you had asked me that a month ago, if I would deal with that even in the first couple of weeks, I would not have expected that type of an emotional response from myself. So, I can't imagine what that's like for people who have gone through it several times too.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
Steve?
Steve Noon, I've been in town for 25 years. I think 20 years ago I had one in high school, one in the junior high. One at Douglas, actually. We could report Douglas.
It looks just as good then, didn't it?
Wasn't great then, it hasn't improved much.
It's not like a fine wine.
It does not age.
Not age well.
More like a moldy cheese.
Some of us argue about who's older, but I am the longest serving member of the committee.
I don't argue about who's older.
In those 25 years, I think you're the 5th superintendent, so I sincerely hope you're the last one I'm gonna see.
I'll be the longest serving.
Yeah. This committee, over the 14 years I've been on it, has always supported the schools. Most everybody I've served on this committee has had kids go through the schools. Most people, that's why they moved to town. There have been a couple of instances when things went off the tracks between the school committee and the finance committee. And you're going to have to take my word for it, because I don't think there's anybody on the school committee that goes back that long. But it really comes down to, we felt we weren't getting the full story. We felt we weren't getting questions answered the way we wanted them. And there's been a big improvement over the years in the transparency in the school budgets. But that said, there's always a few lingering questions. And the easiest way to get along with this committee is answer them as forthrightly and as quickly as you can. Beyond that, I do know where Franklin is. The Association of Town Finance Committees holds their annual meeting in Franklin. And all I got to say is it's a long way from Acton.
It is, yeah.
How long a drive is it?
Well, I don't live in Franklin.
Oh, good.
I actually live a little further south.
Okay.
No, I live in Walpole. And it's, actually, it hasn't been as bad as I expected.
It's
no, it's been under an hour,
Yeah.
on just about every day.
And
Both ways, so.
495 is easy.
Actually, 95 has turned out to be the best,
Huh?
by far. 495 is not the road it used to be in
No.
terms of traffic. So, Yeah, no, it's a little bit of a commute, but that's okay. It's worth it.
So should parents think there'll be more snow days in the upcoming years?
I hope not. I hope not. I think we had enough snow to last year for 2 years.
Indeed.
That's it.
Thank you. Roland?
Roland Borden, I was very impressed with the email from you the other day about reaching out and seeing people, so I'll see you Friday at 8:30. I have a long commute. I commute to Rhode Island every day for work.
Okay, so,
Sunday I'll be commuting to Texas for the week, so a little bit of a hike. So I feel the pain. I commute 495 down, I go down to Rhode Island, down to Fidelity down in Smithfield, so it's 60 miles each way. That's a lot of miles in the car very quickly. One of the things I know that's been a concern of the Finance Committee is continued maintenance of the infrastructure that we have. And I have a son who's in 8th grade at McCarthytown. I was up at the high school, he's taking swimming. There's tons of trash out behind the high school. I have pictures I'll show you on Friday. That just doesn't get picked up. Crumbling concrete still. They spent a lot of money doing concrete over last year. Well, they didn't kind of do the whole job. They did part of the job. And I look at that and I look and say, hey, why aren't we maintaining our facilities better in a lot of this? And that ends up, as you can see, with the condition of Douglas. You keep pushing the maintenance down the road, it comes back to biting you in the long run. Instead of taking care of it as you go along, upgrading systems when you need to, converting to LED lighting, things like that. So that's some of my concerns, that maybe not spending enough on maintaining our infrastructure, maintaining around the facilities, overgrown weeds, things like that. They're just simple things that we taken care of, that if you let the weeds grow, they can get inside the concrete and they break it apart on the side of the buildings, things like that. So some of the things to consider when looking at budgets and looking at man hours and things like that, where can we, little things that fixing concrete, fixing this, doing that, fixing the roofs, et cetera, to make it more palatable, to save the town money in the long term, things like that. So it does concern with the other schools that we hopefully we'll be getting a new dual school, but we still have Conan School. It's not in great shape, and then eventually Blanche is going to need work, and the high school and the junior high and things like that. So it's something that we really need to consider too when we're doing that in budgets and things like that, to save money in the long term.
yeah, and I know that's been a question that's on everyone's minds, and I think the district recognized that going back a number of years. At least probably the last 3 or 4 years of history that I've been looking into, and they've been working toward developing more of a long-range capital plan to improve the infrastructure of the schools. They did contract Doran Whittier,
Yep, very
a
familiar
number of
with
years ago, which is really, more of a long list of things that need repair. And so it really took significant effort to get that into some type of a draft form that could then be actionable over the next 5 to 10 years. And I think that's been a focus of the school district, particularly over the last year. And I know I spent a significant amount of time with Bill McAuliffe, who was the interim superintendent. And that was kind of his last big project he was working on, was to get kind of a first run at a draft. My goal, kind of starting off, and the first 2 weeks have been a little different than what I anticipated for a couple weeks, but we do have kind of an internal meeting scheduled so that I can come up to speed with our staff around work done on the capital plan, and then be able to look at next steps. It is something on the school committee's radar as well, to be looking more seriously at kind of long-term capital interests. So I think, there's going to be more to come, and we're certainly going to be reaching out to you as that process unfolds. I can't tell you I know exactly what the next steps are going to look like at this stage, but I anticipate that will be coming out early fall.
Yeah, I just think it has to be some kind of an ongoing, continuous process.
It does.
But not that we just look and go, 10 years, we checked all the boxes, but
Yep.
you still have been going forward with it too,
Yep.
from time to time. So that's kind
Sure.
of, we'll talk more on Friday on that.
Yep.
The other topics? You're good?
I gotta think of some talks.
Okay.
It's got till Friday.
I would
Think of
also,
Friday.
I would also like to start by saying thank you for reaching out to us. I was already on the docket for our meeting tomorrow when your email came out, but I do appreciate that shows an open door policy and a willingness to meet with us, which we definitely want to encourage, and thank you for having such an open door policy. So I will not take up too much of your time now, because I do want to save something for our conversation tomorrow. Do want to just make sure that I fully understand the fact that we have to go through the process with the MSBA, and so Douglas is officially the school of record, and it could be Douglas Gates, it could be Douglas Conant. Please know that it is our expectation that this is Douglas Gates built on the Gates property. So barring any massive shockers in the stage where we can now finally, now that we have as of this morning, well, in 2 weeks, when we have a architect on board, we can actually start the perk test and make sure that we're good to go, which we've been waiting on for 8 months now, which.
And that will be the massive problem
You know,
run into. Hopefully
I
not.
will tell you, as you do, like, my experience from our project was, we did massive amounts of soil testing, and it still ended up costing, I think, probably an extra $800,000 as a change order, because for whatever reason, you know, we had like a series of glacial till, and the area where the school was constructed actually was, when they removed all the soil, topsoil to build 495, they dumped it on the school site. And somehow they missed drilling holes in some necessary areas, and we had to come in and remove soil, bring in new suitable soil. And so
Yeah, don't do that.
I would rather slow that process down and make sure whatever testing is done accurately and competently and thoroughly. And
Understood, but we
so
definitely,
You hit my one,
Yeah.
my one area that
leading with a twin school is definitely what we would like to,
I
is
have
the,
certainly understood that.
Okay,
I
good.
always just want to make sure I'm
well-
publicly saying the cautious thing.
understood,
Yeah.
understood. Also, I have a long-term piece of homework for you. I'm going to ask you at the last meeting of the year what your thoughts are on regionalization, coming from a non-regionalized school going into this regionalized district. I would love to know the arc of your discovery of the course of the year on that one, so that's a long-term homework. Always wanted to give a superintendent homework, so this was a fantastic thing, thank you. A request from a member who was not able to come tonight. I did mention it in an earlier email. In fact, you can talk with your brethren from the municipal side. The management letter, the auditor's management letter is something that we definitely would like to see, at least for the last year, if not the last 2 or 3. And the sooner that we can have eyes on that, the sooner Jeff will stop asking me for it.
I actually just looked at last year's today. Certainly something that's a public document anyway, so
Right. And
if you want, I can get that scanned over.
great. And I suspect we'll probably have some follow-on questions, but by all means, let's start that process.
Yeah, and just so you know, FY 2018 we will not have now. We would anticipate that would come out
I know.
October-ish,
Yeah.
Yep.
once the auditors are done, yeah.
Understood. That's that. This may be more a question for the school committee writ large, but given the challenge that, the unexpected challenge that you hit on your second week, I take it things are still full steam ahead with challenge success. Is there any reason to question whether or not whether there are going to be tweaks to that, or whether that's going to be changed, or is that something that is beyond your purview and is under the domain of the school committee writ large?
I don't know as though we've had any discussions to stop doing a lot of the work on challenge success. Some of the work the district's done had been work that was ongoing anyway and happened to fit nicely with challenge success, which is I think why they chose it.
Okay.
But I think, I don't think we want to necessarily be doing anything that lessens a focus on kids' social emotional well-being. And I think sometimes there's a misnomer too, because I think sometimes people think that there's either has to be a focus on social emotional learning or achievement. But I think the number one thing that I always come back to is there's a significant body of research around the negative impacts of what's called toxic stress. There's healthy stress and there's toxic stress, and toxic stress has been known to severely negatively impact student achievement. It inhibits learning, lower memory retention, and so I think anything we can do to eliminate toxic stress and unnecessary stress in our kids is a healthy thing because it's gonna help them achieve more. So I think, I don't see that that's stopping. I think it needs to continually evolve to make sure we're meeting kids' needs.
Two quick last things. One, Roland and I are on this year's Acton Leadership Group. I take it you've been read into the intricacies and funness of ALG?
Only a start.
Okay.
You know, I did have an opportunity to look back through some of the information presented last year, very briefly, just to get an overview
Okay.
of that. Can I check my thinking? It seems very similar to what I would typically see as kind of a joint budget subcommittee. Is that? Maybe talk a little bit about.
More complex.
A little bit more complex, okay.
I think you're onto something there. I think you're definitely onto something there. But that'll be another thing that I'd love to hear about at the end of the year, just between the two of us, because I had to go through it for the first time myself last year, and that was eye-opening.
Between the two of us and all the cameras.
Yeah.
I'm going through it the first time myself, so.
Don't worry, guys, you'll be fine.
But I do want to say that I think of ALG as being unfortunately, extremely short-term focused. It is focused strictly on the next budget year. And I think that is fine for what we have to do, but I also feel that the Finance Committee has routinely taken a longer-term view certainly than ALG, and potentially more so than other elected officials who are only there for 3 years at a time. So I would say, dovetailing with what Roland said about, yes, we have to focus on this twin school now, and yes, I'm saying twin school. We have to focus on this twin school now, but let's not lose sight of all the other ongoing things that we have to do. I would also say, please, let's make sure that we look at this as part of as a truly long-range plan. If a building is supposed to have a 50-year life cycle and we have 7 buildings in town, are we really looking at replacing a building every 7 years? What is our long-range plan? How frequently are we going to go back and do another report akin to the Dore and Whittier report to measure our progress, measure ourselves? And then the last thing to echo what I think you've heard from multiple people at this table is transparency. The more we feel that we know what's going on, the more that we can see the value in return for the dollar, the more you will see our full-throated and active support at town meeting, which is the name of the game in a open outcry town meeting where we get to allocate all of our money by public debate. Again, thank you very much for coming and staying late today, but before you head on back to Walpole, look forward to all of our ongoing conversations, and please let this be an open dialogue. If there's something that you hear from the school committee liaisons at the FinCom, or something that you hear by watching our meetings on ActonTV, by all means, please reach out. The better the communication, the better off we all are.
Yeah, and I would say something similar, that if you have questions, please feel free to contact. I always prefer that communication goes right to me, but I can certainly reach out to whatever staff members, I need to be able to provide some answers. I think, I don't know necessarily how your committee works, whether you typically go through the chair.
We're supposed to.
And the chair connects.
We're supposed to, but some of us are not good at
I have the
it.
most experience with it. I think it's an efficient system, simply because it allows me to respond to questions efficiently and quickly, and make sure that the information goes out in a consistent format that everyone gets.
Christine, you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on the transparency. I know it's been brought up a lot, but just specifically the last school budget, we recommended it at town meeting. It wasn't unanimous, but I can honestly say that I was able to get information from Bill later in the summer that we had asked for multiple times, and if we had had it, I can tell you that there would have been 2 more positive votes. So we want to support the schools.
Yeah.
That lack of transparency made it unclear where we should land, and it didn't affect what happened, but it's a positive. We definitely want to be supporting the schools,
Yeah, well,
and it turned out they were doing exactly what we wanted and we hoped, but we couldn't get that information. So,
And we'll talk more about that tomorrow.
Well, and that's what I
yeah,
was gonna say, is, when we get into the processes, I'm really
What's
open
that?
to listening to what types of
Yep.
information is helpful to you, the format that is easy to understand and
Great.
digest, so we can get you what you need.
excellent, thank you so much.
Sure, you're welcome.
Definitely, thank you. With that, you're welcome to stay and listen to our point of view sausage making as we go through our second iteration of this. You will see this document in its final form at ALG. It's what we're going to argue about for the rest of the year. So you're welcome to stay for the first round, but I also understand dinner and having to get home is totally understandable too.
I missed my wife and kids a few times last week, so.
Please, by all means.
Step out,
That's why we put you first,
But
please.
actually, in all honesty, I'm thrilled to get a copy of this now.
Yep.
And this is great information to be able to take.
Excellent.
But thank you all, it was wonderful to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you on Friday.
Welcome.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you.
With that, we are on to the next iteration of our point of view slides. I was able to print them out this time. Some of them are going to be a little small for reading, but I'm going to ask Christine to be the taker to take us through this again. And I also understand that we have at least one request to open up the floor for potentially changing the reserve policy. So with that, it's all yours.
Excellent. Well, I'm not sure we need to go through every single slide at this point. Does anybody, Jeff, I believe, or the people who wanted the verbiage change on the demographic word on the financial status slide are not here to argue their
So,
point.
let's not talk about
So
it.
I think
So we can skip that one for now.
Yeah.
Because we're going to do this at least one more time
Exactly.
before we call this final.
Right, and then the next one is already updated with updated dollars. The state of the town tax rate, your next actual page.
If I could actually,
Sure,
if I
yes.
could actually read those footnotes.
So all those
they-
are.
They would just tell me what, okay,
No, they tell you where I got the data.
All right.
That's it.
good.
Yeah,
Where are
they're
you?
super tiny, so great.
Which page?
They're links.
We were talking about that. Now we're moving on to page
Oh, yeah,
6.
it's Bill Toll.
I should number. Oh, there are numbers. Okay,
Yeah,
so
there
slide
are.
5. Christy and I spent some time discussing and looking online and trying to find the median for these numbers. We were able to get the median because we used median on the previous slide, and it's a better number for what people are experiencing in the town. We were able to get the median numbers for 2016, not for 2010. It is yet to be able to find the median family income for 2010, or the tax bill. I can't remember. It's one of those two where we were, as hard as we searched on the internet, we're having trouble finding it. Yes, sir.
I was gonna say, I know it's kind of late in the game, but one, based on my sort of incomplete research, but one standard of measure that some communities are adapting that would really measure the tax burden on the family
Right.
is you take the average tax bill for the state, for the town, divide it into the total average assessed value, which would really be your tax burden, which is lower than the tax rate. For example, if we're paying $10,000 a year in taxes on average, and the assessed value is $1 million of average, that your burden is what, 10%, which is, whereas some poorer communities, if they're paying $3,000 in taxes, but their assessed property value is, a quarter of what their impact would probably, could be twice as high as, wealthier communities. But I think that dividing the average tax bill into the average assessed value would really measure the tax burden on the average Acton homeowner, which is, I think, a fair measure of, are taxes too high or too low?
So when we did the median instead of the average, the tax burden was higher. So we've got the median here.
That's family income.
Yeah.
I'm
so-
saying the tax bill, the average, like
Right,
what
so,
you-
right, so on this one, we've got the average tax bill divided by the average family income, and that gets you this percentage here.
Right.
The median's higher,
Well,
and it adjusts for,
no, I'm saying divide the tax bill into the assessed value.
Understood. Last year, what we had done, we had specifically called out two separate metrics to try and show competing arguments, right? So we tried to show the taxation as a percentage of income versus taxation as compared to the change in the value of the house, which did paint a divergent picture, which does allow people to see sort of both sides of the actuality, both sides of the equation that people are seeing. Are you suggesting that using this metric that you propose would be a substitute for both of the metrics that we used last year?
I think so, because if you look at just the raw number, or if you look at those two numbers, the average tax bill and the average assessed value, it measures the tax burden, and it shows that, people that live in Acton and Concord and places like that, even though they pay more in taxes, their tax burden is not nearly as high as, say, someone that lives in Air or Pittsburgh or Gardner, towns like that.
Okay, I see that point, I see where you're coming from on it, but I'm concerned that that is a metric that measures only against housing wealth and not a measure against income. Mr. Noon?
Brian, is that information something that's readily available?
It is.
So why don't we take a look at the numbers and see if it tells us anything different? I'm not sure I want to necessarily put it in, but if it tells a story that would be significantly different.
I mean, if I understand this correctly, Mike, so if you take an average tax bill, say, and I'm just throwing out numbers, $10,000 with an average assessed value of $500,000, so you divide the 10 million into the $500,000, I
Right.
mean, into the 10,000 into the $500,000.
Right.
You're coming up with a factor of 0.02, which is 2%, which is
Right.
$20 per thousand evaluation.
Right.
Or 2% tax burden. It's really, it's ultimately, it's your tax rate.
Right.
Now, the only difference here is when you have communities that have split rates, where they're shifting the tax burden from the residential sector over to the commercial sector. Do you want to look at a bifurcated rate, or a town that has a bifurcated rate, or do you want to look at just solely those that have a uniform rate for comparison purposes? I mean, I'm not sure. There's lots of data out there, and there's many ways
Yeah,
you can.
but I'm saying, for a person that has a $500,000 home, it probably brings that number closer to the actual tax rate. But if someone has a $750,000 home or $1 million home, which there are plenty in Acton, they're getting a bargain, I think, from a tax burden.
Well, we could ask them, but.
Yeah,
You gotta look at it too this way, if you look at it, you compare us against a Concord or whatever, Concord has more commercial real estate there. So you could have a $500,000 home there, and they're paying less in taxes because they have more commercial real estate than what we have here in Acton.
well, even if you
So
just
it's-
do the residential piece.
So it's kinda hard, they also have more homes that are multi-million dollars too, so.
So that's what he's trying to correct
It's
for.
something worth considering.
And they have more kids that go to private schools. So
Right.
I suggest we look at the numbers
We look at the
before we
numbers,
make
see
a
what it
decision.
tells us,
What does it make sense to look at the average tax bill versus the household income and take that as a percent of the household income?
Kind of what we're trying to do here, but, when you talk about averages and you talk about medians and tax
And which is
tax
easy to
values
get,
and,
'cause
you know,
everything-
I'm
everybody
sure
uses
the
that.
assessed value is right there with the market value. Or you wouldn't be doing your job.
Well, there is one thing called the EQV, which is the equalized valuation, so you have to understand whether a community is at 105% of market value, which is
Right.
acceptable.
Yeah.
DOR takes those and they take everything, so the guy that's so a community that's 105% of market value, they adjust it to 100, and a community that's at 95% market value, they adjust it to 100.
Again.
That's called the EQV.
Yeah.
So whether that has any merit or not, it might, if you're at 92 in one community and you're at 108 in another, that's a pretty good delta.
So Mike, we'll bring it back to you for future
Actually,
conversation.
there's some literature I can send you on like from the Boston Business Journal or the Wall Street
Okay.
Journal that addresses that, might make sense.
Excellent. All right, I will work on that. Do we want to talk about reserves? On slide 6?
What was the proposed change?
We haven't yet, but the chair has suggested that each year
The
the
chair?
committee,
I said that each year we get to
the
discuss
committee
it.
discusses the reserve policy and sets it for the year. So,
I'm willing to have the conversation. You had suggested that there was potentially something that you wanted to bring up. The one thing that I will say before we get into this is, I'm all for us having a policy and trying to either, only tweak it from time to time or adhere to it for as long as possible, with the exception of whatever we put out here, especially whatever minimum we put out. If we put a floor out, know that we're going to be asked to be at that floor at the floor or below at the time of any overrides. And we're going to have at least one capital override for the town at annual town meeting. We're going to have one capital override for the new twin school, which will be a twin school, probably the fall of next year. And so if we decide to declare a reserves floor, I would, which we have declared for the last couple of years, just be aware that if we make any tweaking to that floor, we're probably going to be asked to be, and it would probably make sense for us to be at that floor at the time of an override. So with that in mind, Christine, what change did you guys want to propose?
me?
Yes,
No change.
Who's making this proposal?
you mentioned to me earlier today that you wanted to have a conversation about changing the reserve policy.
I did, because every time we come to this slide, we skip it, and you had told me previously that as a committee, we were to set the reserve policy.
Yes,
And
well,
since we haven't officially set it yet,
Okay.
this slide is in limbo.
okay, so there's not necessarily any change
Oh, no,
that
I
you.
don't have an opinion on this. You all hashed out in bitter warfare to reach the
Yes, we
reserve
did.
policy we currently have. It is our policy. We overrode it the one year I was on the committee.
Okay.
So I see that we feel very strongly about it. But I agree with what it's going for. You worked hard to come to your math of the lower threshold of 5% and the upper threshold of 3%. And unless you all object to it, 1 year out, I'm fine with leaving it as is.
I mean, I think we should take a look at it every year. I think the upper threshold was a discussion that had some relevance a couple of years ago. It has less and less relevance.
We're
The
gonna
lower
be-
threshold, I think, is where it needs to be.
Do we remove the upper threshold?
So
That is,
we
by
can
the way, on
certainly-
slide 15.
we can certainly have that discussion at some point. But
Is it worth having that discussion now, or should we wait till we have a full
I
complement?
would wait till you have a full committee. And
I'm sorry, I misread. I understood, I thought from your comment earlier today that you were looking to make a change to it. I didn't realize that you just are against this, that we have to put this in here every year. But yes, I think we have to put this in here every year.
Oh, no, I think we need to explain the reserve policy every year, and we need to, there are a few things in here that absolutely need to stay in every year. Because we hadn't nailed down what it was going to be,
Fair enough.
That was my thought.
Fair enough.
So we will-
Before we move off of that, though, does anyone? I think we're going to have this conversation again in a subsequent meeting. I think being down 3 voting members tonight is too many to finalize this slide. But if I can just get a sense of the members in the room, do you think it is appropriate for us to be planning on / projecting / knowing we're going to have to get to the minimum threshold at the time of certainly the school capital override vote? Does the question make sense, Roland?
No, what are you asking?
Okay, so if we're at $6 million worth of reserves, and that is above our floor, if that is above the lower threshold, when we go to the towns, and we want to take out the 80, 90, however many $1 million it's going to take to build a new school, are we anticipating, or do you think it's appropriate for us to anticipate that whatever we need to take out in bonding, we're going to bring ourselves to the floor at the time of bonding, so that we, knowing that this is going to be the largest thing that we do for many years in either direction of that time, do we take it to the floor so that we minimize the taxation?
I don't think so.
I think it's a rule of thumb that if you're going for an operating override, you'd best not have any excess reserves hanging around. I don't believe it's as important in a capital override, because if you're going for $60 million, it's clear we don't have $60 million or any significant part of it in reserves. But when you're talking about, I want to go for a $1.5 million operating override, and you're sitting there with an excess $1 million in reserves, that's a problem.
Okay. So then that brings to the question, how many, what floor reserves do we, how many years worth of the capital monies that we plan on authorizing for the municipal capital side and the school capital side, how many years of that do we want to have held in reserve when we go to ask for tens of $millions in capital override?
I think it's more a question of, is there a plan that says the operating capital budgets have an adequate amount to do the maintenance on the existing buildings? And if they do, then, yeah, we can still go with whatever, 5%. I mean, you're going out to the bond markets, they're not going to want to see you below 5% to begin with.
Right.
I mean,
I also think that's true from the town side as well. You know, I mean, we'll be going for an override potentially in the future, not that far out, for a fire station. And we'll be in the same boat. Now, the time it's going to come along, I need a new truck, I need to do this. Well, we're well over our ceiling. I have excess reserves sitting there. Well, why are we going to the bond market to borrow when we have the money sitting there that we can just take out reserves and pay the truck off?
I'm not concerned about us being up against our upper threshold at this time.
No, I'm not either, but I'm just saying, it's just something, how the optics of it look
Yeah.
on the citizens, saying, well, you have all this money in reserves, and now you're asking us for another 1.5 million because you need a new fire truck, and you want this and this and this and this. And you have, some people feel that we have way too much in reserves. I'm pretty much on the other end of it, because as soon as we want to bond these projects, that reserve is going to look awful small if we have anything major that we need to do quickly because of whatever reason. And my concern is that it's also on the town side of maintaining the infrastructure that we have, and maintain the property that we have now.
Yeah, I hear that, but I'm also sympathetic to the argument of, yes, we absolutely have to maintain our AAA bond rating, and yes, we want to look good as possible when we take the money out, but you're going to be stretched when you take out money.
Of course.
So while I'm willing to be talked off of pegging it to the floor, I would say it makes more sense to, if we have reserves in hand, then minimize the amount of money that we have to take out at the bond market.
Do we have historical data that can show us how often the town has had something happen where we've had to,
Something happens every year.
so, right, so, I mean, it's not hard to go in front of the town and say, you know, in FY this year, we needed this reserves funds for this emergency. In FY whatever, we need the reserves funds for this emergency. And people run budgets in their own homes, and you take out a car loan, you can pay for that car. Sometimes you take it out because, you know, you need your operating budget to work.
Yeah.
So.
I'd be a lot more sympathetic to take out as much as we can if we were still looking at interest rates that are sub 2, but that's
Right.
not the case anymore.
It is not the case, but $1 million, honestly, in this project is.
Too much of a rounding error for you to
is
want to take the risk
kind
out?
of a little bit in the wash.
Okay. well,
I think.
What's the 30-year bonding right now? Do you know off the top of your head? How much it is if we went up for a 30-year bond today? What's the interest rates off it?
Well, we just put out that ban out in the street, and we were surprised that came in at, I don't know, 1.5% or 2%. We thought it was gonna be higher than that. 30-year bond, I don't know, maybe right now, maybe 3.5.
And could increase
Only gonna go up.
if the feds decide they're gonna increase again.
The
Then
longer we wait,
the long.
We're going as fast as we can, Brian.
It's not fast enough.
Hey,
That goes
when I
diagonally
started on this
every
committee, I said we were overdue on building a school.
That fire station should have been done already.
Yeah, fire
it's
station.
interesting because short term you used to get a really good deal. I mean, and now it's catching up to, so your bans, your bond anticipation notes, there was a pretty good sized gap between those and your permanent borrowing. That gap has been closing, so
That's
it's
the
kind of
inverted yield
interesting.
curve that they're all scared about on the street. Okay, well, I'm clearly in the minority on that one, but I said my piece. Okay, so we will review that, whether or not we want to make a change to the upper and lower when we're at full complement.
Okay. All right, I haven't done anything to my favorite graph yet. On page 7, that graph gets into a little bit of the discussion we were just have about,
Yes.
you know, single-family tax bills, single-family house values, single-family income.
Okay.
Whichever 2 or 3 metrics we decide upon at the end of this conversation,
Yeah.
we need to update that graph.
Okay, all right, so Christy and I are looking at the Prop 2.5 concern, page 9. And we had concerns, Prop 2.5, and to me, or property tax rate or something along those lines. But that wasn't our concern. The concern, the way it was written previously, made it look like we were concerned we couldn't tax more,
Right,
and we really, really wanted to.
right.
And that's not the story. The story we're trying to say is, here's what Prop 2.5 does, and the budget spending often exceeds 2.5%. Right, so I hope maybe this tells the story a little better. I included a very tiny, you can't even read it with your magnifying glass, add-on, because I know there is some concern that we're not properly explaining Prop 2.5. We've simplified it in an understandable way in the line that it allows the town to tax no more than 2.5% over the previous year's property tax rate. It also allows the community to increase its levy limit annually by an amount based on the increased value of new development and other growth in the tax base that is not the result of reevaluation. I do not think that that is an easy thing to explain properly when we're trying to take this to school committees and such. So if you have strong feelings about that, speak now.
I think having it in there is fine. Having it in there is fine, and when you go to do the PTSO presentation, depending on the, read your audience. If your audience wants to get into it, then get into it, and if the audience is like, we understand to it, Prop 2.5, then move on.
My question on this is, limits our largest source of revenue.
This was a line from last year's slide. 2.5, our largest source of revenue is taxes, right?
Well,
Correct.
well, it's,
We're limited by Prop 2.5.
right, no, I understand that, I just think of this kind of seeing it out there in that
Yep.
box, I mean, I like the box, I think that's great. And the people can go, well, what do you mean by that?
I can take that out, we can put it somewhere else, we can restate it.
We can be more specific and
Yeah.
say that revenue, 80% of which comes from the tax levy, is limited by 2.5%. We also have new growth that typically is whatever number Brian's picking this year. But then just say that our budgeted spending often, 2.5%. Our budget and spending often exceeds 3 and 4%.
Now, the new growth is.
The
new residential
concern is
construction.
that we don't have enough revenue to cover the spending.
So
Right.
your new growth is your new residential construction and new commercial construction?
It
Personal property.
could be,
One of your personal, oh,
Cars,
new cars.
boats.
Yeah, furniture and fixtures and public utilities. So if you have new growth in the construction field, then you're gonna have significant new growth in your public utilities, so telecommunications, gas, that sort of thing.
it's that building permit you got for your,
There's a rippling effect.
Insulate?
it's that building permit. Didn't you get a building permit when you did something with your house?
Of course he did. Of course he did. Steve, stop rousing rebels.
Let me make a note of that.
Yeah, Roland put a big addition on his house.
So maybe the story is told enough simply by saying taxation is limited by Proposition 2.5. Here's what that is, and budgeted spending often exceeds 2.5%. That's
Yeah,
clear enough, right? Okay.
the point is,
Right.
we spend more than we
spend
take in.
more than we take in, exactly. Okay.
Brian's gonna get on that new growth.
All right, so the compensation growth slides 10. I did pull up some percent increase information on compensation growth for the school budget this afternoon. Tom had talked about a bar graph that showed what compensation growth is, and then a line that showed where it goes over 2.5%. And I can create that. I'm working on it. I just need more data. And I do think that that will be a better visual than all of this verbiage about 71.6%, 79.05%.
Are we comfortable with the current compensation rate will exceed taxation capacity within 1 to 2 years? Because that says within 1 to 2 years, we're going to have an operating override.
Well, it said 1 to 3 years last year.
Yeah,
So I assume that means we're at 1 to 2 years now.
because it all depends on what the turnbacks come back at.
It does. When will we have that information?
And it'll also depend on new growth rates too.
Take a look at, presentation I gave at town meeting, because I did turn some of these concepts into bar graphs and
Nice.
things like that.
I
So
will.
Take a look at, I think I did something on that one.
I think we need to pull that last bullet until,
Yeah,
Okay. All right.
because last I knew, the turnbacks were not going to be horrible.
Okay, great.
And
No, they were gonna be good, weren't they?
they were going to be good,
Yeah.
which stresses me out.
So, okay. Capital projects on line 11, we have addressed critical repairs in issues in town buildings. Do we have any specifics?
Did they
Yeah,
ever do the
library
library
roof.
roof?
That's still not done?
It's, we've got the bids in, I'm not sure if we awarded the contract yet, we may have.
So how does that work? If we appropriated the money for that 2 budget cycles ago and it's still not done yet,
So just sitting there waiting to be,
how does that work? I mean, it's been authorized. Is the authorization in perpetuity?
no,
It's in an order.
they're only good for 3 years.
Maybe for 3 years.
So they're gonna get it done just under the wire.
If we spend $1, it's in there and
Yeah.
If you spend $1, it's encumbered, so.
Chances are they spent the dollar.
I would bet they've spent the dollar.
That's, yeah, that's, I believe that contract, actually, I think they did award the contract already, so that should probably start soon, I would think.
Okay.
They'll get that done, I think,
What I
before.
like to see in the future is when you have a vote like that, town meeting, that bid's ready to go the next day.
For the record, that was
Something like
presented to
that.
us as an emergency. And for it not to be completed at this point belays the emergent nature and speaks to transparency as we just beat up the new superintendent as something that we care about, so.
That would be the former town manager who tells us.
I'm beating the person in front of me as the messenger.
I wouldn't beat on Brian, but
Just letting him know. I mean,
Duly noted.
he's the one who gets to send the
Bring back the new
messages
guy.
back.
all right, do we have any
back to
other
the new guy.
issues
Give
on
me
the
that message back to
horizon
the new
that we
guy.
want?
I would put the
Who's got the first line
new
there?
fire station in North Acton on the 1 to 3 year list. Because this is coming imminently.
Yeah,
My understanding is that it is going to be, that as it currently stands, there is a very real possibility it'll be at the annual town meeting.
okay.
Now, there is a chance that it will get
that it will get slid into the special town meeting of next year.
So does this mean they're gonna bond separate from the schools?
Well, they would anyway.
They would have to, they would bond separately, but the votes might be, depending on if the fire department's ready to go, they might be able to have the topic all to themselves at
Okay.
annual town meeting, or it may be back-to-back articles at a
Would-
special town meeting.
Jason, would you then move also the bonding for the new twin schools
That's
into
what
1
I
to
was.
3 years?
Yeah, that's my follow-up.
Within 1 to 3 years, yes, I would.
Okay,
Because I do expect, short of any major problems in the feasibility study, I do expect we are marching towards a fall of 2019 special town meeting for that process.
excellent. Do we have any 3 to 5 year capital projects then?
I'm sure there'll be some.
Yeah, we need to flesh this one out. I only have 1 to 3 years.
Okay.
So 3 to 5 and 5 to 30.
5 to
Which
30?
I believe is one of the reasons that we were looking at like the list of properties and their age and,
Yes,
to sort of,
yes.
the school has started a 5-year capital plan committee. Does the town have one?
We had an outside consultant look at our capital as well, Christine, and we kind of put some analysis together. And we had, again, kind of like what the schools did, critical needs, and then within 1 to 2 years, and then I think it might have been 3 to 5 years, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, there's a list.
Can we
Yeah.
can we see that
It was
list?
on our capital working committee as well. So we've had that documentation. A lot of those critical need items we've addressed already. We can probably give you guys an update on that, where we stand, looking at that report, what's been addressed, what has not been addressed. I'd be happy to share that with you.
Thank
That'd be
you.
good if you could do that.
That'd be fantastic.
On the 5 to 30 is the phase 2 of the capital building plan, which is which should be Conant/Gates. Because it's depending on whether Gates or Conant get picked up in phase 1, it's gonna be Gates or Conant that gets picked up
Yeah.
in phase
What
2.
about any
And then
junior
also,
high improvements?
yeah, do we have updates to other buildings on that?
That is not being discussed at this
All
time.
right, but they're out there.
They're out there, and if it's a 50-year time horizon on a
Yeah.
building, and you look at the price, you look at the age of.
There's talk about the new DPW building out there. There's West Acton sewers. There's lots of things
New salt shed.
floating around. So
All right, so we can add all sorts of fun
Yeah.
stuff to this capital project. Okay. 2.1 million. Okay, you were gonna follow up with the town manager regarding slide 12, if possible. Have any luck with that?
I did broach the concept. I have not gotten an answer back. I'm gonna give them a little more time to
Settle in.
figure out where the lights are. But yes, that is on my responsibility to make sure that I get you updated information on.
Okay,
Are they doing anything with the cooling system in the library? That's being addressed too at the same time?
South End, West Acton, we're doing some HVAC work there.
West End, what about Memorial?
Mini splits, kind of a quick fix
Yeah, do that Memorial Library too?
in Memorial Library.
Some split systems?
No, those are, I think they're doing complete replacement of the heating and cooling
Wasn't
system.
that approved?
The roof system.
Yeah, there was something I remember there's something doing that, because if they're gonna pull it off the roof, to do the roof over, they'll do that all at once.
The primary push behind that was actually the cooling system over at Memorial Library, and then because the roof is permeated because these units sit on top of the roof, that's why the whole roof had to get replaced as well.
all right.
The systems do work well now.
So we're gonna skip the reserves slide for now. And the recommendation reserve policy. I assume that we wanna continue having the OPEB
Yep.
slide because.
Don't touch that slide.
Right? It's good,
Yep.
it's good information.
I love that slide.
I love that slide. Slide 17, recommendations, capital projects.
We're good with that.
Updated. And I don't think we've changed anything on 18 either.
it's okay.
That's good. I did change the wording on 19, Mike and I had discussed several times that perhaps we were stating something that looked like it was the same thing. And this is similar to the conversation we just had with
Right.
Peter Light. So I changed it to refrain from adding non-reimbursable elements to design and construction of new building. Does that better capture what we were trying to
think
say?
so.
Do we
Still
wanna-
feel like- Yeah,
Do we want to soften it? Because he just made a point about if there is something that is not necessarily, so I'd say if we add, to the- refrain from adding non-reimbursable elements to design and construction of new building unless near-term ROI can be shown.
Long-term ROI.
long
Near,
time?
near term, I don't want to give them 20 years to recoup the cost. I want to get the cost back within 7. I'm not going to put solar panels on my roof unless I'm going to get my ROI in 7 years or less.
But if you do it this way, you figure it this way, if he does an improvement, says, okay, it's gonna take 10 years to pay back, but the bill's gonna last for 50 years, and that's gonna pay 40 years
And I
return.
want to have the right to quibble about it, so I'm willing to throw it in there to show that we're open to, we're not going to be strictly, the MSBA says no, so we're going to say no. We're open to a value argument.
I just say,
But I would-
I maybe wouldn't say near term, I just say return on investment, or some type of return on investment. So,
Okay.
you know, is you just put near term, you kind of, you know, you want to soften it, but you're really not softening it. Then I say, well, you can do it, but what's your return if you can't do it in 6 years or 5 years? Well, forget about it. And it may pay off in 8
Okay,
years
so-
and be,
Without
You know.
demonstrable, clear ROI.
Okay.
thank you.
Mike, are you anti-softening it, or are you okay with that?
No, I'm okay with that.
Good.
Yeah, he did bring up a good
Yeah, he did.
reason to not be.
That's why I want to soften it.
Yeah.
Good job, Mike.
Slide 20, it was specific to last year's budget. As
Yeah.
far as I'm concerned, it can go.
It may be replaced by something
It-
specific to
it
this year's
may,
budget, but I would say at the
but-
moment, no.
I still think we need to have that second bullet, because
Yeah.
even in the ALG meeting that we already had, being told we have to reposition our stance every year, because no 2 years can encumber. I reiterated saying reserves should be used for one-time capital projects, and they came back with, well, one-time projects like the busing is a fine use of it. So much so that when I saw Roland about town a couple of days later, I believe you said to me, what about one-time capital projects do they not understand?
I don't know how many times
Well,
Jason said that in the meeting,
the-
and I think I reiterated it.
it's the-
And
you can't say it enough, so.
So let's not pull it.
they're like
Well,
a camel,
but I'm
they're like an
gonna-
ostrich trying to put their head in the sand.
But I'd like to remove in future,
Yeah,
because it is
just
our,
says reserve should be used for
reserve should
one
be
time.
used.
I'm fine with that.
I'm getting rid of
That's fine.
acknowledgement, because
making
it
it-
acknowledges that we had a policy that people didn't follow. And,
Well, they're gonna, willing to bet you we have to pony up a couple million in reserves to, in anticipation of turnbacks again, so.
Well, not in anticipation. If the turnbacks are there, yes. If they're not, no.
Okay. So this will actually probably be one of the last slides that we finalize.
So we recommended that they provide the finance committee a summary of all town-held lands. I believe that Brian is on that, so I think we can pull that. Because we have that in hand-ish. Yes, I agree. We have what we're looking for out of that. Is
Except
that-
for the fact that we haven't not clearly identified the purpose for the town's continued ownership of all of these things.
Well, no, I'm not just talking about pulling the slide, just the bullet point.
The first bullet.
The first bullet, yeah.
Okay.
What is going on with this River Street property? Why is it still in limbo?
Somebody
was
was
a
talking
committee
about it
studying
now.
What?
I heard something, from Dave Wellinghoff, I think it was his main notes from the SATSAC, that they were looking, well, they need more parking for the train, they think of a second deck, and they're saying, well, if you use River Street property.
Yeah.
Well, everybody's got a use for it, but nobody's in charge of determining what the use will be. Same thing with the Walker property. I mean, there's a committee studying it. Well, our point is, we shouldn't buy things unless we have a reason to buy them.
I agree.
These two pieces of property were purchased a couple of years ago.
and we wanted it transferred to the CPA, is that correct?
That was the
That's the
intent
plan.
This is
of.
what we wanted last year.
Right.
CPA, the town,
The town
Board of
did not-
the Board of Selectmen never put in the application.
So maybe we want to say,
It hasn't changed then.
maybe
Still
we want
want
to
it.
say,
We still recommend,
the
we are
town.
asking the Board of Selectmen to move this to the,
Yeah.
to recommend this to the CPA. Maybe we should be more blunt about it.
We could say encourage.
Yes, Brian?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, just a quick clarification on that. So one of the ideas behind this was they wanted to master plan this first before they made a recommendation to, or brought an application before the CPA. I
Okay,
believe that a committee was formed, met, and has made a recommendation, I believe, to the Board of Selectmen. So that is in play. It's taken, I think, longer than what they anticipated. But,
Doesn't it always?
yeah, but I think right now and there's been some pushback, I think, from some of the citizenry on it, so I'm not sure how the board's gonna handle that currently. But I believe that was the plan. They wanted a master plan and figure out what they're gonna do with it, because as you know, depending on the use of that property, there's different pockets of CPA funding. If it's gonna be portion of it affordable housing that comes out of that bucket versus open space or historic preservation of the dam. And there's only so many funds in each one of those pockets, so they wanted kind of a definitive plan on the use of the property. Then they could go to the CPA and with a proposal, and then to see if there's funding in place for that. And well, you might be able to, I don't know if you can shed it.
But parking lots is not covered by CPA, so if that's
Exactly.
in play, then
Yeah, and I'm sure that the plan is probably to bring it to them this fall, as a project, but.
That'd be.
the point of the slide is we should understand what we own, why we own it, and when we go and ask the townspeople to support another purchase, we ought to have a good idea what we're gonna use it for.
Absolutely agree. The only other comment I would have there is from time to time, these things are maybe on our open space list or on a priority list, and you never know when they're gonna come up, and sometimes the property owner is not willing to wait 6 months or a year or whatever the case, and so.
I fully
They
agree
get
that
fast
these things
tracked very
come up
quick.
and they have to be dealt with, but if we have a priority list of things we wanna buy, then we ought to have a priority list of why we wanna buy them.
Have a master plan, right, on these particular properties. Well, that's a good point. I'll make a note of that.
I think that should be conveyed to the open space committee who are looking at properties like that, and be able to clearly articulate that.
so with that in mind, I think I'll flip these bullet points. Clearly identify a purpose for town's continued ownership of land purchases, which this slide is about, and then the move the River Street property, that's the second
Okay.
one.
Fine.
Okay. On the operating budget slide, the second bullet point, we don't have any action, wait, like that's deletable, yes?
It's gonna come up in ALG
Yeah,
because,
but it's deletable for this presentation. It's either gonna be
Yeah.
300 or
If-
600.
If we're actually gonna
Okay.
try to
You
get
know.
this done before.
yeah, that's true,
this,
that's
yeah.
true.
Let's not assume.
How much do we have left in the, unused?
600,000?
And then I changed the second on the key conclusions. Christie and I wanted to change the language to the operating budget increases should be modest. Overrides will soon impact the tax bill.
What was it before?
Not, well, it's more than 2.5%. What was the, I'm sorry, what you asked, what the,
The
what it said
language
before.
was before, yeah.
So I should pull up my.
Should our key conclusions also say overrides are coming within the next 3 years?
Yes,
They're hard to predict, but yes. Overrides in terms of capital,
Well,
definitely.
that's why, but overrides are coming within the next 3 years.
Yeah. Is it still true to say without a change in spending, operating overrides may become necessary?
Yeah.
as well?
Yes,
So, I mean, that leads,
Actually, that should be the second,
should that be a
Major
bigger,
bullet.
that should be a bigger bullet?
yeah. And then
Right.
this-
It's
the
not
second big bullet now should be the minor bullet.
that. Okay. I can do that. In theory.
That's a good idea.
And one of
bringing
the
up,
appendix
wait,
A's.
bringing up the,
You like
bringing
that?
up the topic, bring up the topic, do
should we have somewhere in this slide deck, the chart of retiring debt?
Yeah, okay.
Where do we want to put that chart? There should be a standalone slide.
I can put it in the front with the state of the town finance. AAA rating, strong collection rate, demographic, and then debt load is shrinking to be soon replaced by new debt.
Currently, our debt load is shrinking.
Yes.
So it should be the new slide 8.
But
Slide 8, is that what you said?
Yep, insert a slide between slide 7 and 8
Yeah.
with a debt retiring chart.
I've got one.
Debt retirement,
Excellent. Please add to Christine.
preferred.
It's town and schools, but,
That's fine, because this is
okay.
the combined, this is the combined set, so I would prefer it be a combined set.
All right.
Okay, I think that's good enough for tonight, because since we're down a third of our complement, we can't make any final.
Could, but they wouldn't be happy.
Yeah, let's not do that to a third of the committee. The next thing on our list are minutes. We have minutes from June 26th, and we have minutes from July 10th. I know they were sent out a day in advance. Does anybody have any edits they wish to make? Are there any motions?
I move approval of the minutes of June 26th.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
I,
Opposed? Any abstentions?
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of the minutes of July 10th.
Thank you, sir. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
abstained because I was not here.
Roland abstains to 7:26. So, 7:10.
If he abstains, do we have enough people to vote them in?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
It's majority of those present.
Majority of those present.
In the presence of a quorum.
Okay. Committee reports. Mr. Majors, you already gave the Minuteman update when the superintendent was here. Is there anything else that you'd like to share at this time?
Walker property.
Do you have something for us
There
finally?
is some news.
Sold it.
Through Selby, we were able to get a grant from the state to study our proposal of doing a 30 to 50 room hotel on the Walker site, combined with a restaurant, farmer's type market, and maybe some housing. That was all based on public input from public meetings we had to talk about the site. And the results are of the study are as follows. I would just give a key sentence and then read the conclusion.
Bless you.
Given a lack of demand generators, both corporate and leisure, the hotel would need to be small, a maximum of 30 to 40 rooms. But the development of a 30 to 50 room branded hotel and restaurant would be extremely difficult to underwrite given construction costs, marginal revenue potential, and high operating costs. In our opinion, this is according to the state, the site is not suitable for hotel development, and as such, believe it would be very difficult to find a private developer to consider the project.
Okay.
So it doesn't look like the boutique hotel is feasible, at least at this moment. But we are going out to, with an RFP to developers to see what they can do with that site. And the site continues to appreciate, it's not losing value. We're also going to find some money to really see if we can dress it up a bit with some serious earth moving and I don't know about planting grass, but maybe find
Wildflowers.
some funds to dress up that site a bit, just so it becomes more curb appeal.
Is it your read of this that they're looking to sell it for housing?
That's one possibility, but I don't think that's not the sense of the committee. That Housing Authority would love to have it. You know, there are a lot of special interests in town that love to do something with it. We still want to do something unique. That's why we are now going out to developers to see what their ideas are. And hopefully we'll have something for the special town meeting or the December town meeting. That the people, and even a public forum before that to discuss our new findings. But the hotel, based on the study, does not appear to be feasible. They are saying, you know, we have corporate presence here, but not a big corporate presence. You know, we have tourist stuff here, but we're not Concord, we're not Lexington, we're not westward from, you know, from a corporate headquarters point of view, even though we're getting places like Insulet, they're saying that demand wasn't there, although.
Yeah, but in that case, they built that new hotel in Littleton.
Right.
You know, which is probably closer to Insulet than this would be.
And there's also the one down at Baker Avenue in Concord. They built the residence in.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I just don't want to see the property turned over to either another boring strip mall or into more housing. So while I don't want us to carry it on our books, I definitely want us to do something productive with it. Okay, well, that was depressing.
He kept teasing good news. I felt.
There's a lesson for you.
Christine, do you have anything?
I do not.
Okay. I do, from the school committee, I did find out, I was told that Amy is going to be the liaison from the school committee to our FinCom.
Okay.
All right.
The school building committee update, you heard from the superintendent, that's firing on all cylinders. I'm not at all surprised to hear that we're going to a interview round. I am surprised we're doing all three. I would have expected us to have only done two, but I guess more the merrier. Steve, any news from HIT?
This is the only committee I'm on that's been meeting this month.
Okay. I won't take that as a personal affront.
Got nothing.
Roland's got nothing. Okay, good. Then
I do get a motion to adjourn.
Second.
all those in
non-debatable.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're done.
All
Two
right.
questions for you.